Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Behaviorist Book Club. We are a community of busy research-focused practitioners trying to stay in touch with current literature in our field. You can find me at my website, behavioristbookclub.com, and also my Twitter, BehavioristBC, and Facebook group, The Behaviorist Book Club. This is an exciting episode because this is the first of a new series. You'll see that it's named differently. It is called One Less Lonely Practitioner. This is a play on words of how I personally felt in my first few months as a BCBA. I did have the supportive coworkers and boss, but something was missing. I felt that I personally couldn't admit my struggles that I was experiencing as a BCBA for fear that nobody else was feeling them as well. For example, my first few months, I barely had enough time to take a lunch. I was hurrying from client to parent meeting to client, never sitting down long enough to catch my breath. I kept quiet, but little did I know that my other coworkers were feeling the same stress that I did. We could have commiserated and shared strategies and become better analysts, but it took us a few months to realize that we weren't in this alone. We had people to share it with. This series, I hope, will lessen that stigma. I really wanted to seek out other behavior analysts and talk about their successes, their struggles, give people a realistic look of what others are experiencing in the field. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, but there are a lot of really cool moments, and I hope to share not just the negatives, but also the positives and everything in between on this series. To kick this off, I had the privilege of talking to Dr. Clelia Sigaud. She is a special educator as well as a instructor in a verified course sequence in ABA. She is a nationally certified school psychologist and conducted her postdoc training split between the NBU at the Kennedy Krieger Institute in Maryland and SERESC in New Hampshire. We chat about her experience in the school system as a verified course sequence educator and as somebody who works in severe problem behavior. She also helps run the site learningbehavioranalysis.com and host bi-weekly task list study groups, which can be found on our Facebook page, learningbehavioranalysis.com on Facebook. You can find all of her links in the show notes of this episode. And I hope you guys really enjoy the conversation that Clelia and I have. Talk to you guys after. So I know you have the website. Is that something that you do full-time or is that just a part-time?
That's a good question. It's very much part-time. I would love to expand the website side of things more, and that is something we're working on. My friend and colleague Patrick Jackman and he lives in Illinois, and he and I collaborate all the time on this site and on the task list reviews and things that we do. So it's very much part-time for now, but we've got big plans to make it even better. But yeah, there's no income coming in from that. So I do have actual, I'm gainfully employed elsewhere. I teach a full course load across a couple different universities in Maine and Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for folks who are preparing to be BCBAs and special educators.
Okay.
And I do eligibility evaluations, psychological evaluations as a school psychologist. And then I do severe behavior consultation in schools.
That's fascinating. You have your hand in so many different buckets. Tell me about being the instructor of is it a verified course sequence?
Yeah, they both are.
Tell me about some of the some of the best parts of that and maybe the worst parts of that as an educator, because I imagine there comes with a lot of red tape, but also maybe some guidance.
Nice. I like that question. I mean, it's overwhelmingly awesome. I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that, I get to talk about this stuff that I really love to talk about with people who are going to go out in the field and do clinical work. Like I am, that's just great. I love that. There are definitely some challenges, like you said. Red tape. We've got grading. We've got figuring out rubrics and figuring out number of hours for certain task list items and all of that jazz. And that's tedious, and for sure,
Yeah.
I don't have a future in logistics. Let's just say that. But overwhelmingly, it's great.
So are you currently teaching at a place where it is a master's in special ed with a specialty in ABA?
Good question. So for the I teach at Wisconsin Whitewater. I teach one class for them. I started this semester, and continuing on in the spring, which is great. They have a it's mostly a program for folks who are in the classroom now, who are looking to get that extra credential in the context of special ed, which is wonderful and so needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I also teach at the University of Southern Maine, which is where I graduated from. And I teach in the ed psych program there. So many folks there are in education, but not all. And the degree is an ed psych degree.
Okay. So I went to a only ABA master's program. Do you feel like there's a difference in content, or maybe a difference in the amount of time spent on ABA content at a full ABA master's program versus a special education plus ABA program?
I do. I do. I worry sometimes about our science getting diluted or getting reduced to more of a procedural set of, quote unquote, like tricks, as opposed to, a science. And I do think that that can be particularly concerning in context, like as you say, where ABA is sort of embedded into something else.
It's really interesting you mentioned that our science getting diluted into that quote unquote bag of tricks is what I've heard, because I've heard other people echo that concern. As an educator, is there a way that you help to promote against that view? Like a way of teaching that avoids the bag of tricks mentality?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I really appreciate the fact that we really get to stand, like, this is not my term obviously, but we really stand on the shoulders of giants in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone who pioneered behavior analysis as a science had anything whatsoever to do with special education or disabilities. It's a wonderful, wonderful application of what we do, but it's really not the only one, nor is it the way that our science, originally started developing. So, in terms of practical approaches to that, I really do try, and you see this on the website, I really do try to offer lots of, multiple exemplars of concepts, including examples where it's not even clinical, right? Everyday examples of reinforcement, everyday examples of response generalization, helping people kind of see, not only is this not just for folks who have autism, it's also for folks who have other kinds of clinical concerns, and it's just a general thing. This is just how behavior works, and we all behave. So I do think there's real power in just multiple exemplar training. I was really, really happy this semester to get to teach single case design for the first time at USM.
It's one of my favorite topics.
It's just such a blast. I mean, it's wonderful, and there's so many opportunities to talk about, obviously functional control, right? Which has nothing to do with disabilities. It's helping folks with disabilities is just one application of that. So yeah,
that's really cool. I love the I subscribe to a newsletter from another podcast I listen to, Paula Pants Afford Anything. It's a finance podcast, and her whole podcast is based on first principles. And it's the concept that no matter what financial question you have, if you apply basic principles to them, you can get to an answer logically. And I think that echoing that in our ABA terms and our teaching styles. I have a few supervisees myself, and trying to not teach them a DRA or an FCT or things like that, but teaching them the principles of reinforcement, matching law, those good old rat lab questions.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what brought you into behavior analysis? I find this is typically a question with a lot of varied answers. So was it the population that brought you in, or was it the science, or something different?
Yeah, that's a great one. I love hearing people's origin stories in this field too. So for me, I went into education as an undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I particularly wanted to be a teacher, but because I felt like it would help me explore kind of cool directions. I really like kids, so I was like, hey, why not? And I started working in special ed right out of undergrad, as I was getting my first master's degree, which was a degree in special ed. I was a teacher for a while, which was wonderful. And so I was working in special ed at this private program that served folks who really were struggling very, very hard. And I mean, we sort of know the story of, the under-resourced program. There's no real scientific programming. People are just kind of getting through the day. And I just got on the internet and I was like, how do I
wow.
fix this? There's got to be some kind of an answer here for this young man who I was working with one-on-one, who was just absolutely not doing well. And so that's when I first heard about ABA. So then I learned more about it and figured out that you could get a degree in it.
Wow. So it was a Google search?
Yeah.
That's wild. I've never heard that before. Huh. Wow. So you were a special educator at the time, and then you went back to get your master's, or did you go for a clinical psych degree?
Yeah, so I finished up my special ed degree, master's degree, and I taught special ed for a few years while I was in school to get my degree in ed psych, to be a BCBA, and then I got my doctorate in school psychology. So yeah, just my special ed practice was very much informed by ABA as I learned more and more and started conceptualizing what my students needed in a more scientific way. So it's special ed is just an amazing job. I wish that, or I'm going to say that a different way. I'm really privileged to be able to support the people doing the actually important work, which is actually working directly with the kids.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before that you had this severe behavior consultation role. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like day to day?
Yeah. So some fun facts about the ABA consultation role. I am actually the team lead for our severe behavior program. Mm-hmm. And I'm the only person on the severe behavior program right now.
Congratulations for that team lead.
Thank you. So we're, I'm looking forward to, as we are able to attract talent, hire people, that's going to be wonderful. So if anyone listening wants to come to New Hampshire and work with severe behavior, let me know. But yeah, at this point, I'm really super privileged to be able to really craft what I want my practice to look like. And I'm pretty new to New Hampshire. So really what I'm doing is I'm working on creating this clinical process where schools are able to get access to really high quality assessment, functional analysis, actually looking under the hood at what's going on, treatment analysis, figuring out what's going to work, not just hypothetically what might work based on the function, but what actually will work, what's going to work in the context of what you have going on for staff and for resources and for all of this. And then moving on to, staff training, and then tapering off into your garden variety consultation. So it's, it's case by case, and it's definitely a resource commitment from the districts, but it's really exciting to be able to kind of craft a process that I feel like is really high quality and that teaches me a lot. Plus, it's a blast. I mean, who doesn't want to do severe behavior work? It's amazing.
There's a rush to it, it seems like.
Yes.
So in this position, do you spend a lot of time like training the teachers? Since like you aren't able to be everywhere, is there a lot of teacher training that goes on as well?
Exactly. Yeah. So the process is after the assessment, which typically that would include an FA, and we've got treatment analysis to really tweak what we want to do in context. Then there's plenty of the behavioral skills training and really transferring truly the bulk of what's going on to the stakeholders.
Okay. I have many questions about that because I think that what you just described is, as a relatively new clinician myself, it was my biggest learning hurdle was going. So I have clients who I serve as a consultation to the school. I get to be a little bit more hands-on than it sounds like you might get to with some of my behavior techs. But for my first question is, do you do the functional analysis or the analysis of the dependent or the independent variables in the school setting, or do you switch to a different location?
That's a great question. I do it in the context in which the student is currently exhibiting the challenging behavior.
So can you talk a little bit about perhaps the methods that you found the most success with, and also explaining that methodology to the teachers?
Yeah. So in terms of functional assessment, as I'm sure you're aware, there's just this wonderful, amazing conversation and controversy going on in our field right now.
Ooh, here it comes. The drama.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's such healthy drama, and I think I am going to answer your question, but on this topic, something that really, really scares me is when people get dogmatic about it, because that's inherently unscientific. So one of the pieces of the severe behavior team that I really want to emphasize as we bring more clinicians on board is really being able to think flexibly about what's the nature of the problem that we're attempting to solve. Not, am I an isolated contingency person or am I a synthesized contingency person? To me, that's nonsense.
I love that.
And surprisingly, it's as you know, it's surprisingly challenging to really identify highly experienced clinicians who don't have a pretty staunch position on one side or the other.
Do you mind if I interrupt? Because I want to bring in my own experience with this topic.
Yeah.
I was trained at Kennedy Krieger in their neurobehavior unit, which I think I may argue is one of the most functional analysis traditional Iwata 1984 FA programs out there. And as soon as I became a clinician and left that, I started to explore all the different methodology. And what I came across was this argument. And I've just had such an interesting time wading through it and selecting through the arguments and finding the scientific facts. So I think the point that you're making about not being dogmatic was really hard for me. And I felt that because I did have good training and I did know the functional analysis, but when I left Kennedy, there was no part of me that was going to participate in a PFA. It's changed a lot now as I've opened my eyes a little bit more, but preach. I'm definitely understanding what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's amazing. So I left the NBU at Kennedy in February.
This February?
Yeah.
I left January.
That's amazing. So it sounds like wow. You're blowing my mind right now.
Cool. Do I know you?
Were you in inpatient or the IOP?
So I was in inpatient, but then I also my last 6 to 8 months, I don't remember what, I was on the feeding unit. So I was neurobehavior unit for about a year and a quarter, and then I wanted to get feeding experience, so I switched over to the feeding unit, and then I came down to be a BCBA in Florida.
Got it.
That's probably where we missed each other.
Yes. So that's awesome. I have so many questions about feeding, but we can do that another time. So I was a postdoc at the Columbia outpatient MDU location. So that's why we missed each other, particularly with COVID. There wouldn't have been any crossover there. Very cool. Yeah. So it sounds, and we can talk more about this offline because obviously we can't spend all day here, but it sounds like we walked away with very different inclinations when we left the MBU around dogmatism. And that's so interesting. It's just one of my favorite things in this field to kind of talk about and conceptualize, because it takes us back to those core features of social validity, right? Like why are we here? Are we here to demonstrate things for the purpose of demonstrating them? We're not.
Is our assessment informing our treatment better than a more humane assessment?
Right. So, so to circle back to the original question, that's basically what I head into, and what I headed in with. So like recently I did, I just did a pretty standard, in the colloquial and the clinical sense of the term, standard FA for a little dude where it was safe to do so, and I did it in his classroom, and it was fine, and they informed a great, intervention. And that doesn't always make sense. Sometimes that's way too unsafe in the context of where they are. And so at that point, and I'm still really learning to think about, given all of these tools, how do we flexibly apply them in a way that still makes our work analytic? We can't always do as much variable isolation as we would like.
Yeah, I think of it I think of experimental precision on a sliding scale, and you can have something that is experimentally precise, like the ISCA, but not as experimentally precise as maybe an isolated contingency analysis. But for the same reason that you give up some precision, you may gain another aspect or another advantage. So I really like the concept of flexible thinking. I guess we've kind of talked about the dogmatism, but in general, not just in functional analysis research, where do you feel like ABA is right now? I think that as a field, we've gone through a wild amount of changes in the last 70 years. So where do you feel like ABA is now?
You know how people say that ABA is like in its adolescence? And sometimes what do I know? It's not like I've been around forever. It does seem like perhaps we're actually more in the terrible two still. And taking the long view, no, but seriously, I do think, I totally agree. There's just this incredible change, incredible growth just by the sheer numbers recently. And really great conversations about maybe questioning some practices. Not for the purpose of getting rid of them. I mean, we shouldn't get rid of isolated contingency FAs. At least that's certainly not my goal. But I think it's really healthy for any scientific endeavor to have a lot of constructive criticism directed at its practitioners. That's kind of how that works. I'm really, really encouraged by the more mainstream acceptance of ABA, like in settings like schools, beyond early intervention for autism, which is still a wonderful application of our science, and other people can benefit too. And so I'm really encouraged when I see, like school-based folks who are not BCBAs, for example, having a really positive view of the field, or having worked with BCBAs. So it's sort of leaving the early intervention for autism kind of realm,
Yeah.
which I feel is really awesome.
Yeah.
I do, I worry about whether we're preparing our new clinicians or pre-service folks. Are we preparing them for all of this controversy? Are we
That's,
preparing?
yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not
Yeah.
sure that we are.
I didn't truly learn about the ISCA until after I graduated.
Same.
It was briefly mentioned, but we didn't go into any of there was a little bit, but it didn't get the attention it deserved, which I think speaks to the vast amount, because I think my master's program was fantastic, the vast amount of education that we need to have clinicians to have before they become BCBAs. So in that realm, as someone who's been a BCBA for a little bit, you're a teacher now. What would you be your biggest piece of practical advice for the newly minted behavior analyst, the one who just got their BCBA, maybe are first starting their caseload, and are wide-eyed and nervous?
Yeah, what an exciting time. In some ways, I still feel like that's me. I mean, practical advice. One piece of practical advice I would have is may seem, I don't know, too basic, but hang on to your textbooks and keep up to date with new editions and things like that. I'm always surprised anecdotally how many clinicians I know who don't buy the newer editions of things because they're not in school anymore. I think that's a mistake. Like, you should have, my perspective, my opinion, you should have notes all over that thing. You should have tabs and all of this jazz. There's no way you know everything that's in there. There's no way that your everyday work doesn't tie back to core principles that you need to revisit. And I see that all the time when I'm privileged to do a little bit of peer-to-peer consultation sometimes for folks who are behavior analysts. We're always coming back to those core things. So yeah, hang on to your text. Don't assume that because you took the exam that now you can forget about that stuff, because it's really the question of whether it's on the exam or not is far less important than the question of, is this going to inform my practice?
Wow. I love that. Yeah. I think that speaks to a lot of the experience I had newly becoming a behavior analyst. My master's program was extremely reading heavy, article heavy. I fell in love with the literature. I became a BCBA and didn't look at it for 6 months. And it was a busy, it was that I didn't feel like I had time until I realized that I had to make the time. So I love that advice. One more question, because I know we're running into the time. What is your favorite success story? What story do you use to just give you that smile before you go to sleep in our field?
Wow, I've had a little bit of time to think about this. It's really amazing how lucky I am that I actually had to kind of sort through a bunch of experiences. Really, for me, looking back, any time that I used FCT as part of a behavior reduction intervention, and it really there was that reinforcing contingency for the caregiver, where it's not uncommon for the para or the parent, whoever I'm working with, and I'm sure this happens to you too, they'll start to cry.
Yeah.
When they see the client communicating for the very first time, and sometimes the client's 19 years old, right? And we did this in one session, and that's just, I want to do that until I drop dead. It's just so awesome. It doesn't get old.
That's so cool.
It's wonderful.
I love that. Well, that's the time we have. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me and talking about this. This is awesome.
All right, guys, that just about wraps it up. I had a great time talking to Clelia. I think I could have talked to her for another 30 minutes or more, especially considering that I didn't even realize that she was trained at a place that was similar to where I was trained. So that was a really great conversation, and I hope you guys took a lot out of it. I think what she said was really fantastic, especially her point that it's not about adhering to either the synthesized contingency or the isolated contingency models. It's not about dogmatic devotion to one or the other. It's about applying them scientifically and systematically approaching the situation in a way that makes sense for the client. We are a client-centered field, and I think it's really important to maintain our scientific client-focused center, regardless of what procedure we think may be more preferred by most people. So anyways, I hope you guys really enjoyed that. We're not going to have a schedule for One Less Lonely Practitioner. It's just going to be as I meet and talk to BCBAs that I want to showcase and show. If you would like to be on this, you can contact me on my Twitter or Facebook page. I'd love to have more people on this series, and just hit me up and we can schedule it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoy Wednesday and Friday's episodes, which are a little bit more fun than our typical just Java in one take, as we dive into behavior analysis and practice and take on some pretty fun and unique articles.